You know it's heartbreaking when you remember a game you loved as a kid, but you had to move on because you were too stupid to know about emulators. So the game just disappears from your life. Years go by, you grow older, your brain finally reaches the minimum intelligence required to download ROMs. You find that game again, you boot it up, you're ready to relive childhood magic, and then the game sucks absolute ass, not regular ass, I'm talking liquid doo-doo levels of ass. And the game that I'm talking about is, shaking my head, Battle Arena Toshinden on the PlayStation 1. Now to be fair, back in the 90s, this game was actually kind of a big deal because fighting games at the time were mostly 2D. You had stuff like Street Fighter 2 where everything happens on a flat plane, but Toshinden came in like, yeah, we about to do 3D now. Characters could move sideways, dodge attacks, circle each other, which at the time felt revolutionary as a motherfucker. Today it feels like two drunk mannequins fighting in a parking lot, but back then my mind was blown, and the roster was actually pretty cool. You had characters like Eiji Shinjo, the main sword guy, you had Sophia, the whip lady, you had Rungo Iron, who looked like a pirate that just escaped a bar fight, and every character had their own weapon and fighting style, which sounded awesome on paper. And they also looked like they were made of paper, until you actually replay the game and realize the combat feels like you're swinging weapons underwater. Everything is slow. Half the moves feel like they have 3 business day startup animations. And sometimes you press a button and your character just stands there like, yeah, I'll attack, just give me a moment. But here's the weird thing, even though the gameplay aged like expired milk, one thing about this game is still god tier, and I'm talking about the music. I'm not even exaggerating. Some of these characters' themes go way harder than they have any right to. Sometimes I'll literally be at the gym listening to a Battle Arena Toshinden soundtrack, and then halfway through my set I'll suddenly realize, why am I lifting weights to a 1995 PlayStation fighting game OST? Like, what kind of life decisions led me here? But the music genuinely slaps. Each character had their own theme that matched their personality, and for some reason the composers were like, yeah, this random niche fighting game deserves absolute bangers. Meanwhile, modern games with $1 million budgets are out here producing elevator music, like what the fuck. But here's the funny part, when I replayed Battle Arena Toshinden, I realized something. This game is basically a time capsule of early 3D gaming. Developers were experimenting, trying new mechanics, trying to figure out what worked, and sometimes that meant creating games that were, let's say, a little rough. Okay, a lot rough. But without games like this, you could be scared of what we could have lost. So even though Toshinden might play like 2 inflatable tube men fighting outside of a car dealership, it still deserves some respect, because it was one of those early attempts at pushing fighting games into the 3D era. And honestly, even if the gameplay aged terribly, the nostalgia is still there, and the music's still a certified gym playlist banger, man. Which is probably the weirdest legacy a fighting game could possibly have. But it still has a legacy though. Anyways, I'm out.